Everybody has a favorite Minecraft update. For most of you, it's probably the Nether update.
Actually...
But over the years, there have been so many new versions of the game that it's getting hard to keep track of them all. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to recreate every single major update, starting with the very first version of the game all the way to the new 1.21 update, leaving us with a museum of the entire history of Minecraft, I guess. So first things first, I'm going to need somewhere to put them all, and I was thinking that the mini desert temple in my mega base would be the perfect entrance. So I'll just dig down here. Perfect. And now for the museum hallway. I'm going to need a beacon for haste 2, and then I can demonstrate the power of editing. Along this hallway, I'm going to be digging out different sized rooms depending on how big each update is. The first ever version of the game, Cave Game, is going to get a small room because it's not going to get any simpler than this. All I'm going to need is some grass, cobblestone, and then light blue concrete for the sky. And while I'm trying my best to recreate Cave Game, you'd probably want to know what Cave Game actually was. I mean, it's either that or we can just sit here inside. All the way back in May 2009, a guy named Marcus Persson, or Notch, began working on a game that would soon be known as Minecraft. At first, he called it Cave Game, and all it consisted of was a 256 by 256 world that looked something like this. Ours does not look like this, and so I spent a week creating texture packs for every major version of the game. There's a download link in the description if you'd like to help justify the amount of suffering that went into their creation. But now I can use these texture packs to make sure each update I build actually looks like it did back when it was released. And now we actually have something that looks like Cave Game. The last step is to seal it off with glass so it can't escape. Less than a week later, the first publicly available version of the game was released, beginning the era of early classic creative. Now, I could show you the process of mining out every single room, but nobody wants that. So to make this more interesting, I'm going to challenge myself to think of a transition for every single one, and you guys can tell me your favorite in the comments. Starting now. Yeah, that's going to be no one's favorite, but they'll get better as we go. For early classic, I'm going to need some new blocks. Just be careful not to hurt your eyes, these updates are almost as saturated as the average Minecraft thumbnail. Sand, gravel, and trees were all added in the early classic updates, along with some pretty major changes to world generation. Instead of a cube floating in the sky, the world now generated as a large island surrounded by an infinite ocean. So for this exhibit, I'm going to make that. I'll just add some of the new sand, a patch of gravel, the ocean, and all that's missing now is the blue sky. And that's early classic creative done. Other than the glass. I don't have any glass. Okay, I shouldn't have to worry about that again for a while. And now it's time to move on to the multiplayer test updates. Here's the transition, as promised. As the name suggests, these updates did indeed add multiplayer to the game, as well as some other important mechanics, but I'm going to be focusing more on the stuff that I can actually collect. For the terrain, I'm just going with a grassy field with a pond. And I know these exhibits might seem a little simple and similar now, but they're going to get a lot more complicated as the video goes on. This update added dandelions and roses, red mushrooms and brown mushrooms, and cloth. Cloth was basically wool before sheep were a thing. And because dyes weren't in the game yet, the colors were a little weird looking.
What is that? What is that?
Sponges were also added to the game. And there goes my pond. Here's a gold block, which used to look a lot different back then. Then the flowers, and the mushrooms, and the cloth. The last thing this update added was clouds, so I'm just going to try my best to make some. I really tried. Oh, and glass was also added in this update, but it looks so bad that we're not even going to use it. Next up, we have the survival test updates. I'm 10 hours in, by the way, and I've done 3 updates out of 36, so we're on a great pace. Besides the obvious addition of survival mode, these updates added the first ever mobs to the game, so I'm going to be adding a cave into this one. And then once the sky is done, and the glass is in place, I'm going to fill it with all the new mobs. The first and easiest mob to collect is going to be the pig. I can just fly him right over to the entrance, shove him down the hole, and into the exhibit. To keep the mobs from despawning, they're going to need name tags, and so henceforth, all mobs in this museum will be known as Jeff. Isn't that right, Jeff? The rest of the mobs are hostile, so I'm going to have to turn off the mob switch, and now if I fly over to the far end of the tunnel, which is actually really dark, I should be able to get some to spawn. Being able to use leads on boats is probably the best parity feature ever added to Java Edition. The first mob I ended up trapping was a spider, but after realizing that it was just going to keep climbing the walls and jumping off until it died, I decided to put it out of its misery and move on. The creeper was pretty easy thanks to the boat. The skeleton was a little more annoying because of the whole shooting thing, but I eventually got him trapped, along with the zombie. No, Jeff, no. Go back in. After that came the late classic creative updates. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because most of it was just technical changes. In fact, the only two things that I can physically represent are obsidian and a sheep. So I guess that's late classic collected. Next up we have InDev 0.31, and we're just a few updates away from the alpha versions of the game. This one was a really important update though, because it added two of the most crucial survival mechanics to the game, crafting and smelting. So for this one, I want to try making a blacksmith themed exhibit, and after a little work, some trial and error, I ended up with this. And now I've just got to add in all of the new stuff like diamond blocks, diamonds, tools, and coal. It may seem like a small update, but it kind of shaped survival Minecraft as we know it. While building the exhibit, I was interrupted by a thunderstorm, so I took the opportunity to name tag some charged creepers so I could trap them later on. It mostly went according to plan.
Oh no!
In the end, I got about 2 of them, and a couple of witches. I'm sure future me will be very grateful. But moving on, we've got the InDev update. Don't worry, this isn't a case of deja vu. This one doesn't have the numbers after it, so it's a completely different update. Okay, who is in charge of name? This transition is going to be ugly, but in my defense, I completely forgot to record one. The InDev update was also heavily focused on survival mode, so I'm starting things off with a really simple wooden house. It also added farming to the game, so I'm going to need to add one of those. And it might be confusing, but furnaces were added in this update, a couple of months after smelting was. Yeah, you used to cook things by throwing them directly into fire or lava. Paintings were another new feature, alongside armor. And that's pretty much everything, other than the sky. And for that, we finally get to take a break from the light blue concrete, because this update added a day-night cycle. The last update before the alpha versions is called InfDev. At least they changed a letter, I guess. The main feature of this version of the game was the infinite worlds. Suffocation was also added. Just thought I'd throw that out there. My coolest idea for this update was to fit an infinite world inside the box, but my coolest idea was also impossible, so the backup plan is to build a cave. A lot of the major features in this update are cave themed, like dungeons, minecarts, and rails. In the back corner we have our dungeon, and for that I'm going to need a block for the spawner. So I'm going to be using some gilded blackstone. And then to finish it off, I'm going to replace some of the cobblestone with mossy cobblestone. And I'll throw some of the new items into the chests. I must have hit my head while collecting those items, because for some reason I decided to build a mine shaft next, and those weren't added until beta 1.8. So just pretend like it's not there until I fix it. Something that was actually added in this update was cobblestone and obsidian generation. And finally, some ladders and a sign. Does this ladder actually lead to the surface? You'll never know. And that's InfDev collected, besides the mineshaft, but we'll be back to fix that later. Okay, Alpha 1.0 and 1.1. I'm going to be grouping these two together because they're pretty small. Oh look, a random wooden button. I wonder what that does. Alright, behind me we have another isolation chamber, which clearly didn't work because I'm standing out here. Alpha 1 was essentially the redstone update, adding redstone ore, redstone dust, redstone torches, iron doors, pressure plates, buttons, and jukeboxes. Alpha 1.1 added compasses and fishing rods. You couldn't actually fish with them yet, but you could pretend, I guess. As far as blocks and items go, that's pretty much it for this update. But there were a few more mobs, like cows and chickens. And also slimes, which took 10 minutes of flying and building a giant glass tube to finally get them down there and into the room.
Why?
Next we've got the last alpha version, Alpha 1.2. And for the first time, I'm going to need a mega room.
Okay.
Alpha 1.2 was the version that biomes were added to the game, so I'm going to need a lot of new blocks. And that's Alpha 1.2 almost complete. I'll show it off and explain all the new features in a minute, but for now I need to work on getting a couple zombie pigmen. And there we go, that's everything collected. We've got a swamp biome, plains biome, tundra, forest, desert, and the nether in the corner. Also, grass and leaves are no longer neon green. Moving on to the Minecraft betas. This next room is going to be for beta 1, 1.1, and 1.2. The main thing I want to showcase for these updates is the new trees. Before beta 1.2, the only trees in the game were oak trees, but with this update came the new birch trees and spruce trees. So on the left of the river, I'm going to be doing a forest biome. And on the right, a taiga biome. But this update came with a little more than just trees. The first aquatic mob was added to the game in the form of squid. They weren't exactly the smartest creatures, so I had to tie them down for their own safety. The other mob, sheep, were not added in this update, but they did receive the new ability to become dyed and punched for wool. Yeah, punched. Current Mojang would never. There were some other random items added, like cake, dispensers, note blocks, lapis, sandstone, and bones, but I figured those blocks scattered around the forest would just look like a bunch of junk. The next updates are betas 1.3 through 1.5. These are kind of a small, chaotic group of updates, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. For the background, I'm going to go with a forest theme, and for the new things added, we have redstone repeaters, beds and sleeping, wolves, and the infamous naturally spawning pink sheep. Now, what could possibly be chaotic about this calm little exhibit? Yeah, this was the update that charged creepers were added to the game. And I'm glad I created 2 of them because that turned out to be the perfect amount to convince me that it wasn't worth trying to trap one. This revelation wasn't without frustration, of course. So let's just sweep that one under the rug and move on to betas 1.6 and 1.7. I thought about putting all 5 of these last updates together, but 2 small rooms are easier to make than 1 medium room, and I'm efficient. I promise the rooms after this one are going to be more interesting than an empty field, but for now I need to fill this empty field with grass. That's right, grass has evolved and is no longer restricted to its blocky form. Pistons were a new addition in this update, and I thought it would be cool to have them pushing cobblestone and bricks back and forth, because both of those blocks got a texture update in this version. TNT was now lit with flint and steel instead of punches, and finally shears were introduced, leading to a sharp decline in sheep abuse. From now on, there should start to be more of a variation between the rooms, so less forests and plains biomes and more unique ones. Beta 1.8 is special because it was the last version of Minecraft before the game was officially released. And it actually had a name, Adventure Update 1. The features of this update were mostly cave themed, with things like ravines, mineshafts, and strongholds being added. Not my best work, but for this one I'm going to try to build a ravine inside the box. For some reason I decided not to record a time-lapse of this one, but I think these clips do a great job demonstrating how it went. I think it turned out pretty good. The ends are a little flat because I didn't want to dig into the other rooms, but once I get some stuff in here, like this mineshaft I'm building, it should take some focus away from the rest of the room. Speaking of mineshafts, I finally blocked off the one from the InfDev update. It's like it was never there. The new one is looking pretty good. For the stronghold, I'm stealing some blocks from the real one under my base, and I guess I'm just going to build an exposed hallway somewhere over here. Like that. Then some rails in the mineshaft with the chest minecart. And that just leaves us with the new mobs. The first one is the silverfish. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go as planned, but you'll see why later. Next is the cave spider, which I got from a mineshaft that was intersecting the museum. Of course, cave spiders suffer from the same problems that regular spiders do, in that they don't exactly have the best survival instincts. So, Enderman. It turns out that the mob that can literally teleport was the only one I could trap in a box. Today I learned that silverfish can crawl back into a block, and since this entire room is made of stone, it's time to move on to Minecraft's official release, version 1.0. This update was a big one. It added the End Dimension, Ender Dragon, Nether Fortresses, Enchanting, Potions, Villagers, Mushroom Islands, and some other biomes. The plan is to split the room into 3 sections, one for each dimension. For the overworld, I'm going to start off with a mini mushroom island. Then a mini village. Fun fact, when villagers were first added to the game, their AI was based off of pigs, which explains a lot actually. In the back of the overworld section, I added some of the new snowy mountains. The nether section was really just a bunch of netherrack with a mini fortress in it. For the end, I tried to create some mini obsidian pillars, and I could only do so much with the space that I had. But I'll be building a cooler exhibit with the end dimension later on. Now for the mobs. Blaze and magma cubes were both added in this update, but I don't hate myself enough to try to capture a blaze, and this isn't an I trapped every mob video, so you can't make me. And that's Minecraft version 1.0 collected. That portal shouldn't be there. Alright, version 1.1. That naming updates thing didn't last too long. I'm going to go through this one faster than a rocket, because this version is almost as small as the late classic creative exhibit. The biggest change was the addition of beaches. So there's a beach. And I'm putting a sheep in here because they could finally regrow their wool by eating grass in this update. So now that I think about it, it was probably this update that ended sheep abuse. Thankfully, the next update has a little more substance. Version 1.2 was when jungles were added to the game. So just excuse me while I destroy this one real quick. The room isn't exactly tall enough for a classic jungle tree, but with enough distractions and some old-fashioned leaf spam, it almost looks normal. There's 3 new mobs for this update: the Iron Golem, the Ocelot, and cats, which you used to get by taming ocelots before they became a village mob. But that's version 1.2 finished. If the next update had a name, it would probably be the worst thing to ever happen to villagers update. No, wait, they're supposed to rhyme. The Savory Treasured Trades update. Okay, moving on while I still can. This is the update that villagers were upgraded from retextured pigs to intelligent creatures. Kind of. It was also the update that added jungle temples and desert temples to the game. So you can probably guess where this is going. Now I just need a villager. Well, this guy has his own personal bodyguard. I guess I'm the bodyguard now. Watch your head.
The game begins up in the air, and how about that? You never seen that before, Peter.
Do you like your new name, Jeff? Of course you do. And now that Jeff can't escape, we can release him. And give him some emeralds to keep him happy. So that's version 1.3 collected, and I'm happy to say that I can now begin calling updates by their name, because from now on they all have one. So the Pretty Scary update. The main features in this update were the Wither, beacons, witch huts, and witches. So I'm thinking we do a swamp biome with a witch hut and fill it with all the new stuff. That was the last of my grass, so I guess it's time to deface more of my spawn chunks.
Brother,
I'm almost done with one side of the tunnel now. It just keeps going. Excuse me? Who are you? You're not Jeff. For the witch hut, I'm just building a regular witch hut. So I'm not sure why I'm even showing you this. Alright, now to fill it with the stuff. I lied, I'm moving this tree because it would stop you from seeing the stuff. On the side, I'm adding a little beacon. And now it actually works. I'm not going to be trapping any wither skeletons in there, but I will use their skulls to create a reference to the wither. Anvils were added in this update. But we all know that the Minecraft community loves to watch us hardcore YouTubers suffer, so here goes the mobs. If you remember earlier, we caught that zombie villager Jeff and left him in the boat, so this one was a freebie. I also name tagged those witches while getting the charged creepers earlier, and it seemed like we were going to make great friends. Sure, she broke a bottle of acid over my head, but we all have our own ways of showing love, and Jeff is no exception. In the end, we decided it was best for us to be on opposite sides of the glass though, so I had to say goodbye to my poison paradise. What is this bit, dude? If that wasn't enough suffering for you, here's me trying to trap a bat for 10 minutes. I eventually learned that the minecart method wasn't going to work, so instead I built a box to try to trap them in. This was the closest that I got. Until I noticed this guy was just sitting there. Once I had him locked in, I confirmed that bats are immune to minecarts. They're also immune to leads, and before I could figure out another way to move them, this happened. I was so defeated that I didn't even do a proper transition for the next exhibit. Version 1.5 was the redstone update, and I'm just going to fill this blank box with all the new blocks. We've got the TNT minecart, hopper minecart, activator rail, redstone block, comparator, daylight detector, dropper, hopper, trapped chest, weighted pressure plates, and quartz. And that's literally it for this update. That was definitely a bat. The redstone update was actually the last update on this side of the tunnel, which means we can finally start going back the other way. It's been 100 days already. First up on the other side of the tunnel is the horse update. For the transition this time, I came up with the grand idea of punching a boat. The horse update is exactly what the name suggests. It added hardened clay and carpets. Okay, there were hay bales too, coal blocks, stained clay, and fine, yes, there were horses. Lots of horses. There were also donkeys and mules, but you don't see them getting any recognition in the update name, do you? I won't have it. We're renaming this one to the Stable Steeds update. That's everyone in, and the donkey is getting tied down because leads are new and somebody had to get it. The next update might sound a little dramatic, but it's actually kind of true. The update that changed the world added 12 new biomes to the game.
Look at all this floor space! So many activities!
But I'm going to narrow it down to the 9 most iconic ones to save space. And collecting this update took so long that I think it only makes sense to turn it into a montage. Alright, well, that took 3.5 hours, but I regret nothing. I had to make the trees in the front mini, or else you wouldn't even be able to see the biomes in the back. But I really like how this one turned out. We've got the Badlands biome, Giant Taiga, Ice Spikes, Savanna, Regular Taiga, Dark Oak Forest, Sunflower Plains, Flower Forest, and Birch Forest. And the 3 biomes that didn't make it were the Gravelly Hills, Stony Shores, and Deep Ocean. So sad. Oh well. Version 1.8 was called the Bountiful Update. It added a variety of new things like red sandstone, slime blocks, diorite, andesite and granite, rabbits, but I think the highlight of this update was the Ocean Monument and Guardians. So that's what I'm going to be building. Naturally, to make my own monument, I'm going to have to destroy one first. Probably not this one though, they have a strict no spoons policy. Alright, I went ahead and hollowed out this other monument, so I should have all the blocks. I just have to build it. Hi, next is to fill my new fish tank with water. And decorate it. And now for the fun part, moving guardians. This actually wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. After setting up the nether portal above the tank and linking it to a portal on the nether roof, all I had to do was use some soul sand to push the guardians up into the portal. And then send them across to the other portal. I managed to bring back 5 Jeffs total, and I think they really helped bring this exhibit to life. The 1.9 combat update is quite possibly the most controversial Minecraft update ever, but regardless of how much this update may have hurt you, we can at least all agree on one thing. It was an update, and that means I'm going to have to collect it. Other than the obvious changes to combat, version 1.9 was basically an end update. It added end cities, chorus fruit, end gateways, the elytra, which at the time could only be used for gliding, and shulkers. Good old shulkers. I used my shulker farm to try and capture some, which went exactly how you would expect. I was eventually able to get them away from the farm and into the nether. Of course, the fun didn't end there though. There was still plenty of fun to go around. I managed to get him into the portal next to the mega base. Had some more fun. And on the way over to the drop chute, this happened. Yeah, leave it to me to find a way to drown a shulker. I repeated all of the steps with the next shulker, except the drowning part, albeit very narrowly. Some gentle waterboarding maybe, but no drowning. After bringing him into the exhibit and letting him out, he was finally trapped. Skeleton traps were also added in 1.9, and those of you who watched my biomes video may remember the skeleton horses that spawned. They're still down here, and I collected one to represent the skeleton trap. But this update wouldn't really be complete if I didn't fly to the end to get an elytra and hang it on the mini end ship, or build something to represent the controversial combat changes. The Frostburn update was a bit of a smaller one, and it was kind of just an update that added some random things here and there. The main things added were polar bears, strays, husks, magma blocks, bone blocks, fossils, and taiga villages. But I see where Mojang was going with the Frostburn name, so my idea for this one is to give it almost a yin-yang effect. In the desert, I added a fossil, and to mirror it, I decided to add an igloo on the snowy side. They were added in 1.9, so technically we're an update late, but I needed something to fill the space. And then there were the mobs. Starting things off with the polar bear, they don't fit into boats, but at least I could use a lead on them. Things were going great at first, I was having a good time, until I went through the portal and found that they murdered all of my foxes. So if any of these mobs deserve to spend the rest of their existence locked in a glass box, it's these guys here. I did the husk next because I thought it would be the easiest. I could just use my mob farm to spawn one. Turns out my mob farm no longer works because mobs can't spawn on scaffolding anymore. So I tried to keep myself busy until nighttime arrived. Once it did, I trapped a husk as quickly as I could and then flew back to the snow biomes to try to get a stray before daytime. It didn't take long to figure out that this one was going to be a little more difficult to catch, but that was really just the beginning of it. The thing about pulling a ranged mob in a boat is that they just keep on shooting you. But you can only get hit so many times before you start to recognize the pattern. And I had a few hundred blocks to figure it out. I left him in the boat until I got the husk in, and then I was able to safely release them from the other side. And that was the Frostburn update. Next up, we have the Exploration update. And I'm taking these transitions a lot more seriously now. I'm using the F3 menu to get the exact position and angle I'm looking. For update 1.11, you'll see that the sky is made of birch planks. And that's because it's not the sky. For this exhibit, I'm going to be recreating the entryway of a woodland mansion, and those planks are for the ceiling. This one took me an hour just to build, so I'm going to use a time-lapse. Now, if it looks off-centered, that's probably because it is. Just don't look at it. This update also added the ability to fly with rockets, creating the Elytra experience we all know today. Vindicators, Evokers, and Vexes all came with the Woodland Mansion. I'm not going to be trapping the Evokers and Vexes though, they're just so much fun that I probably wouldn't get anything done if I had some near my base. I'm still going to capture a couple Vindicators though, because I can't just leave the place empty. Am I allowed to leave it empty? So exploration was added to the game, and then Mojang said, let there be color. And there was color. No, just gray still. The World of Color update added glazed terracotta, concrete, dyed beds, and parrots to the game. And so I'm just going to use those blocks to turn this entire room into unicorn puke. Perfect. Now for the parrots. That can't be healthy. And that's the World of Color update finished. Version 1.13 was the aquatic update, and this one is one of my favorites. This update completely overhauled Minecraft's oceans, and before it, they were pretty much just water. So what I'm going to do is split this room into 4 main ocean types, starting with a couple icebergs for frozen, filling in the floors, and adding some grass. Before I add in the coral reef, I want to try capturing the first mob, which is the dolphin. It's important to know that dolphins are not fish. But are they wizards? I thought they might be, because after I got them into the exhibit, gave them their name tags, and set off to collect the coral, along with a pufferfish, I returned home to find that one of the dolphins had gone missing, and then the second one went missing too. On the bright side, I still had my pufferfish, Jeff, and the coral reef turned out looking good. I tried making an air gap at the front of the tank, but if I've learned anything while making this video, it's that Minecraft mobs have zero survival instincts. That's okay though, because there's plenty of more real fish in the sea. I added the fish in, then a turtle,
bombastic side-eye, criminal
salmon, and cod, and for the structures, some ruins in the cold ocean, a shipwreck in the frozen ocean, and finally some drowned. It's really cool to see an update transform something that was pretty much just dead space into something so alive. Next up, we have the Village and Pillage update. Simple, but clean. The main features of 1.14 were pillagers, raids, villager biome variants, and workstations. Also, the textures of pretty much the entire game were redone. I added a mini outpost on the snowy side of the room. We're just going to pretend like it's not going into the ceiling. And then for the grassy area, it's actually going to be a bamboo forest. Plot twist. Luckily, I still have some foxes down in my storage room because they were added in this update. And of course, pandas. So that just leaves us with the pillager, specifically one with a banner. This video is sponsored by boat leading. You might think after thousands of hours and years of experience, one would know everything about Minecraft, but this game has a way of always teaching you something. Rest in peace, Jeff and Jeff. And if you think I'm going to choose pillagers over the most adorable creature in the game, you're simply mistaken. The pillagers are horrible beings and probably don't deserve more than a banner anyways. Despite being one of the smaller Minecraft updates, I'm actually excited for this one. The Buzzy Bees update added everything bee related to the game. And so in the background, I've been collecting all of the blocks we're going to need from my farm. My idea for this room is to turn it into a giant hive inspired by the ones you can find in Terraria. Unlike Terraria, we can't place honey in liquid form in Minecraft, so this is going to have to do. And for the rest of the room, it's pretty much like terraforming a cave, except with honeycomb blocks. It might not be as cool as my inspiration, but it's still one of my favorites, and it got even better once I filled it with bees. And now we've got version 1.16, the Nether update. I'm just going to jump right into this one because if you couldn't tell by the size of the room, it's going to be huge. So if this one isn't montage worthy, I don't know what is. So that's it. I'll give you a full rundown in a minute, but first I want to capture the mobs. The first mob I'm going to be trapping is a baby hoglin. Once I got him through the portal, he had the same reaction I usually do when exposed to sunlight. And it turns out he had a reason to be scared, because the mod I was using to leash the boats was a little bit buggy. Technically, leashing boats is a vanilla feature as of update 1.21, but I'm actually still playing 1.20 because my mods aren't ready for the new version. All that to say, I needed another hoglin. This little patch of netherrack worked way better than I expected, and luckily this time he didn't self-destruct. In case you forgot, Minecraft mobs don't like existing, so he did try to drown himself.
Hello, I am under the water. Please help me.
But now he's tied down in a glass box, so I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. For the last mob, I wanted a couple Shiders. I really expected these guys to be easier than the hoglin, but turns out they're more allergic to water than I am to the sun. The rain stopped 50 seconds later, by the way. Oh, imagine that! Imagine that! I think it's safe to say that my patience was wearing a little thin by the 5th hour working on this update. But with the Striders sealed in, it was finally complete. We've got the Crimson Forest, with what's supposed to be a mini bastion, Basalt Delta and Soulsand Valley in the back, and a Warped Forest with a ruined portal. For the next update, we have Caves and Cliffs Part 1 and 2. Because Part 1 was essentially a half-baked version of the final product, you know, half-baked might be a little generous, it was more like having all the ingredients laid out on a table with a preheated oven. I'm going to be combining them into one exhibit, because I think it makes the most sense. Now, it might look like I ran out of blocks while making the sky, but that's because the caves are going to be on the left and the cliffs on the right. Just like the last one, this update is kind of big, so I'm going to do another montage. Alright, that's everything placed down. We've got the new cave biomes on the left side and the cliffs on the right. As usual, there were some new mobs added in this update, and for those I'm going to need some more name tags. I thought I'd change things up this time and go with the name Jeff. The first new mob is the axolotl, and if you watched the mob heads video, you'll remember my floating island axolotl breeding dungeon. Glow squid were also added in this update, and I was trying to tie it down so it wouldn't beach itself, but this game has a way of always teaching you something. Okay, well, I guess the glow squid problem is solved. I'm gonna go get some goats. 2 should be enough. I mean, 1 is plenty, really. And you might think that's it for this update, but it became clear that Jeff was going to impale himself on the dripstone. And I was not going to be responsible for another death in this video, no matter how hard they tried. We've got 4 updates left now, and next up is the wild update. Once again, we have a split exhibit. The left side is for the mangrove swamp, and the right is going to be the deep dark. And you guys are probably more familiar with these newer updates, so I'm going to just... Alright, that's 1.19 collected. Not the most detailed ancient city, but small space. The only thing missing now is the frogs. You know, one of these days I'm going to learn that you can't use a bucket on those. Not today. And that's it for version 1.19. I could put the warden in here, but he would kill all the other mobs and probably me, so we're not going to do that. The Trails and Tales update is coming up next, and this one is kind of a simple one compared to the last 3. Is it just me, or is it a little dusty in here? There we go. For this update, I'm going to be doing a desert biome and the new cherry grove biome. Something like this should be a good start. And then we'll throw in some plants, because who doesn't like plants? Ow. Besides the cherry grove, 1.20 added trail ruins to the game, and these things are usually buried, so I'm going to make a pile of the blocks that they usually contain. And that's how trail ruins were made. Over on the desert side, I'm going to make a bamboo shack to represent the new bamboo wood that was added.
What?
It's not really anything special, but it's a shack, so. Pots and pottery sherds were added, along with armor trims. And now for today's edition of Aust Getting Annoyed by Minecraft. Today, we have the fact that you can't attach a lead to a panda. Now, I can think of a few arguments why this might be the case. Number 1, they're too big. At least that's what I always thought, until I realized sniffers, camels, and polar bears can be leaded. 2, they're too cute. 3, they're endangered. Polar bear, axolotl, dolphins. I mean, the sniffer is literally extinct. 4, Mojang doesn't want us to move them around fast. 5, pandas would get poisoned if they ate the leads. Okay, now we might be onto something. Anyways, the egg is ready. I can just put it down, and we're off to collect the other new mob, which is the camel. It took a little while to fly him back, but once he was inside and the proper safety measures had been taken, the sniffer had hatched, and 1.20 was collected. Now, the next update is a unique one, and that's because it's the first version released between two major updates that's worthy of an exhibit, the Armored Paws update, and it only seems fair to leave this transition to him. The room for this update is kind of small, but it should be all we need. And I probably don't need to remind you what was in this update since it just came out this year. But I'm going to anyways. 1.20.5 added the armadillo to the game. I had to fly 9,000 blocks to prove it, but they're here. And so are the new wolf variants. The reason I'm collecting mobs first for this one is because there aren't any new blocks, biomes, or structures in this update. And now that I am finally running version 1.21, my boat flying experience will probably look a lot more like yours.
Hey, Ron. Hey, Billy.
It is still possible to fly with boats in 1.21 if you spin in circles on the way up, but it's not exactly easy. Now, I'm not going to be collecting every new wolf variant because that just seems unnecessary. I'll give you 4. You get 4. Oh, that's weird. I could have sworn I just crafted that 2 seconds ago. For the room, I did a Badlands biome, since that's where the armadillos spawn, and I gave 2 of the wolves a set of the new armor. So now all of those bad guys trying to hurt them won't be able to. And that brings us to the final update, version 1.21. The room might look a little weird now, but we'll fix it soon. Just another trial of my chambers. I took a villager hostage so that I could trade for a trial explorer map. And that led me here. Here is a little vague, so I'll show you my trial chambers map.
Do you see a
Trial chambers? Me neither. That villager sold me a fake map, and honestly I can't blame him. I ended up spending half an hour digging straight down and running through the caves trying to find it before I finally decided to use chunk base. After finally making it into the trial chambers, I was ready for a fight, and I found one. It was a long, grueling fight. 15 action-packed seconds that felt like 5. And if it wasn't for the regen potion that dropped, I probably wouldn't have survived. Surely the new breeze mob would be a more formidable foe.
You serious?
You know, sometimes I have to remind myself that the difficulty of these new updates are geared towards kids playing on iPads. No offense. The reason I'm destroying this entire room is because I'm going to take it and rebuild it in the exhibit.
What the hell is even that?
It's a potato! Thanks! Okay, that should be all of the blocks packed up. Now I just need to go back and use the schematic I created to build a perfect copy. And for the mobs, I'm going to need a breeze, a bogged, and that's it really. Let me just make the rest of the tunnel look a little less ugly. And here's the entire history of Minecraft, I guess. There were some other random items, and I guess I'm just going to build an exposed hallways. I could only do much to make my own monument. I'm going to have to... This actually wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Oh really? I managed to get an elytra to hang on the mini end ship. You'll see that the sky is made of birch. Just choked on the word birch, it's such a disgusting wood. It might not, because the mod that because part 1 was essentially a half-baked. Because baked. Now it might make. As usual, there were some new updates. Yeah, well. As usual, there were some new mods added. Glowskit. that's what I always thought until I realized. Now the next up, 2 major updates that is worthy of an exhibit, because it's the only update released between 2 major updates that is worthy of an exhibit. Just another trial of my chambers. I took a villager hostage. 15 action-packed seconds, but it felt like 5. Surely the new breeze mob would be a more familiar. You know, sometimes I have to remind myself the difficulty of the base game is geared towards iPad kids. And now I've alienated half my audience.
Do you see the trial chambers?